what is being described as the most significant shift in German foreign policy since the end of the Cold War, Chancellor Friedrich Merz announced that Germany is now placing itself on a national footing to prepare for a potential continent-wide war with the Russian Federation. In a grave and historic address to an emergency session of the Bundestag, Germany's parliament, Chancellor Merz declared that Russia's action over the past 24 hours, specifically the state-sponsored assassination of a senior Ukrainian official and the subsequent terror bombing of Kyiv, have fundamentally changed the security reality for all of Europe. He argued that the era of hoping for a diplomatic resolution while providing arm's-length support was over. The time had come, he stated, for Germany to accept its responsibility as the central power in Europe and prepare its military, its industry, and its people for the imminent possibility of direct conflict. The speech marked a final and dramatic break with decades of German strategic caution and signaled that Europe's largest economy now sees a war with Russia not as a remote risk, but as a looming reality that must be prepared for. Chancellor Merz, speaking with a somber but resolute tone, laid out a vision for a new German posture called G7 or total security. This new doctrine, he explained, moved far beyond the Zeitenwende turning point policy declared by his predecessor. The Zeitenwende was a necessary awakening, Merz told the silent chamber. But today we face a new reality. The enemy is no longer just at the gate of our friends in the East. By committing political murders in the heart of a European capital, the regime in Moscow has shown us that it will not be bound by any rules, any law, or any appeal to humanity. It has brought the war to all of us. To hope for peace now is to be willfully blind. We must prepare for war to preserve our freedom. His words were met not with applause, but with a heavy, solemn silence, acknowledging the gravity of the moment. The core Merz plan involves a massive and immediate rearmament of the Bundeswehr, the German armed force. He announced that Germany's defense budget would be immediately and permanently increased to 3.5% of its GDP, a figure that far surpasses the 2% NATO commitment and would make Germany by far the largest military spender in Europe. This new funding is not for future plans, he stressed, but for immediate action. He announced the invocation of emergency procurement laws to fast-track the production and acquisition of military hardware. This includes a massive order to ramp up production lines for Leopard tank, PZ-2000 self-propelled howitzers, and a tripling of the manufacturing capacity for 155mm artillery shells. He also announced a deal to purchase additional F-35 fighter jets from the United States and to accelerate the development of the next-generation Franco-German air combat system. Crucially, Merz's plan extends deep into German society and its powerful industrial base. He announced that the government would invoke national security clause to direct key industrial sectors to prioritize military production. In a move that would have been unthinkable just years ago, major German manufacturing giants in the automotive and heavy machinery sectors would be tasked with retooling some of their production lines to build military transport vehicles, drone components, and other essential wartime materials. The same industrial might that built the world's best cars will now be harnessed to defend our continent, Merz stated. He also detailed plans to reactivate a national civil defense strategy, including reinforcing public bomb shelters, replenishing national stockpiles of food and medicine, and launching a public awareness campaign on emergency preparedness. Furthermore, he announced plans to reintroduce a form of national service requiring all young men and women to undergo a year of either military or civil service to build a national reserve of trained personnel. The announcement sent shockwave across Europe and was seen as a powerful endorsement of the hardline stance taken by the Trump administration. Chancellor Merz revealed that he had spoken with President Trump, as well as the leaders of France and the United Kingdom, before his address to coordinate their response. His action effectively provided a powerful European pillar for the American policy of confronting Russia. For NATO, Germany's move is a game-changer, transforming the alliance's Central European member from a reluctant partner into its most determined and powerful non-nuclear military force. The message from Berlin was clear and unambiguous. Germany, the economic engine of Europe, is now preparing for a major war, and it is calling on the rest of the continent to do the same before it is too late. France draws red lines for Russia, adding a new and profoundly dangerous dimension to the escalating global crisis. French President Emmanuel Macron issued a direct and unambiguous ultimatum to Moscow. drawing a firm red line that, if crossed, would trigger a direct military response from France. In a solemn and televised address to the French nation from the Élysée Palace in Paris, Macron declared that Russia's recent actions had pushed Europe to the brink and that strategic ambiguity was no longer a viable policy. Coming on the heels of Germany's historic decision to prepare for a continental war, France's declaration served as a sharp and specific warning, defining the precise triggers for its own intervention. The move effectively created a clear tripwire for a direct conflict between a major nuclear-armed NATO power and the Russian Federation, raising the stakes of the war in Ukraine to a level unseen since the darkest days of the Cold War. President Macron, standing before the flags of France and the European Union, stated that the assassination of General Budanov and the subsequent terror bombing of Kiev were not just attacks on Ukraine, but assaults on the fundamental principle of European security. While he praised the unified economic and diplomatic response from the West, he argued that the moment now required absolute clarity on the military consequences of further Russian escalation. We have sanctioned their economy. We have isolated them diplomatically, but the regime in Moscow has answered with murder and indiscriminate missiles, Macron said, his voice steady and grave. They believe they can act with impunity. Tonight, on behalf of the French Republic, I'm here to tell them they are wrong. There are limits. There are lines that must not be crossed. He then explicitly defined two specific red lines. First, he declared, any use of a tactical nuclear weapon, a chemical agent, or biological weapon on Ukrainian soil will be considered a direct attack on the security of the European continent and will demand an immediate and decisive response. This declaration removed any doubt about how France would view the deployment of weapons of mass destruction in the conflict. The second red line addressed the precarious situation around Ukraine's nuclear power plants. Furthermore, any deliberate Russian military actions that result in a catastrophic radiological event at any of Ukraine's nuclear facilities, thereby threatening the health and safety of millions of Europeans, will be met with the same force. Crucially, Macron did not leave the consequence of crossing these lines to the imagination. He stated that such an act by Russia would obliterate any remaining distinction between supporting Ukraine and direct intervention. He announced that a French military response would not be limited to Ukrainian territory. If Moscow unleashed such horror, he warned, France, in coordination with our allies, reserve the right to conduct a conventional strike to neutralize the source of the threat, wherever it may be. Our response will be swift, it will be devastating, and it will be aimed at ensuring such an act can never be repeated. This thinly veiled threat of striking targets inside Russia represents a monumental escalation, a public declaration that French forces would engage directly with the Russian military if the specified line were crossed. To give his words immediate weight, President Macron announced a series of military deployment. He ordered the French Navy's flagship, the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle, and its entire carrier strike group to be deployed to the eastern Mediterranean to project stability and be in a position to respond to any contingency. He also placed France's Strategic Air and Space Command on its highest level of non-nuclear alert and authorized the immediate deployment of a brigade from the French Foreign Legion to Romania to reinforce NATO's eastern flank. These are not measures for a war of tomorrow, Macron concluded. These are measures of prudence for the crisis of today. The choice between de-escalation and a wider conflict now lies solely with Moscow. France has drawn its line. We pray it will not be tested. The world now holds its breath, watching to see how the Kremlin will react to a direct challenge not just from Washington, but from the heart of Europe itself. In the last-ditch effort to pull the world back from the brink of a wider war, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio held a grim and intensely fraught meeting with his Russian counterpart, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, in the neutral city of Geneva, Switzerland. The emergency summit, held under a heavy veil of security, represented the last open channel of high-level communication between the two nuclear powers as the crisis spiraled out of control. However, sources familiar with the discussion reported that the meeting yielded no breakthrough and was characterized by a frosty and uncompromising atmosphere. The diplomatic failure reportedly infuriated President Donald Trump, who, according to White House insiders, is growing increasingly angry and impatient with what he perceived as Russian President Vladimir Putin's personal defiance and refusal to de-escalate in the face of unified Western pressure. The meeting was convened at the urgent request of the United States following the dramatic escalation by Germany and France. Secretary Rubio's mandate was not to negotiate but to deliver a final, unequivocal message directly from President Trump and the United Western Alliance. According to a senior State Department officials traveling with the secretary, Rubio bluntly told Lavrov that Russia had fundamentally miscalculated the resolve of the West. He laid out the consequences of Moscow's action in stark terms, emphasizing that the assassination of a Ukrainian official and the terror bombing of Kyiv had galvanized a response that Russia was not prepared for. Rubio reportedly detailed the specific military preparation now underway in Germany and reiterated the firm red lines drawn by France, making it clear that these were not empty threats but concrete policy shifts that had put Europe on a war footing. He stressed that President Trump viewed the Kremlin's action as a direct challenge to his administration and that his patience had run out. The core message was simple: Russia must cease its offensive actions in Ukraine immediately or face a direct and potentially catastrophic conflict with a unified and fully mobilized NATO. Foreign Minister Lavrov, a veteran diplomat known for his unflappable demeanor, reportedly listened impassively to the American ultimatum. In his response, he gave no ground. Russian state media, citing sources within Lavrov's delegation, reported that the foreign minister reiterated Moscow's official position, blaming the crisis on a decade of NATO expansions and aggressive American foreign policy. He flatly denied any Russian involvement in the death of Kirill Budanov, dismissing the accusation as a crude provocation designed to justify Western military buildup. He characterized the new European military posture as hysterical warmongering and warned that any direct attack on Russian forces or territory would be met with the full might of Russia's military, including its strategic arsenal. The meeting concluded after less than an hour with no joint statement and no plans for a follow-up, a clear sign of a complete diplomatic breakdown. Back in Washington, the failure of the Geneva meeting sent a fresh wave of fury through the White House. Aides described President Trump as being apoplectic upon being briefed by Secretary Rubio. The president, who prided himself on his ability to force outcome through strength and personal will, reportedly sees Putin's refusal to back down as a direct personal affront. His anger is said to be directed not just at the situation but at Putin himself, who he feels has ignored his direct warning and crossed a line by engaging in an act of state-sponsored assassination. This growing personal anger is a volatile new element in the crisis. With the final diplomatic off-ramp seemingly closed and President Trump's frustration boiling over, the world is now watching to see what the next move will be from a U.S. president who has been told that his nation's power and his own personal warning are being ignored. The failure in Geneva has not cooled tensions. It has set the stage for an even more forceful American response. In a final stunning act of defiance that caped a day of unprecedented escalation, Russia announced that its military-industrial complex is now producing and deploying an average of 1,000 drones per day for use in the Ukrainian theater. The declaration, made not through a diplomatic channel but in a triumphant televised briefing by Russia's Minister of Industry and Trade, was a blunt showcase of Moscow's wartime production capacity. It served as a direct and material answer to the West's sanctions, threats, and new military posture. This staggering number, if accurate, represents a fundamental shift in the attritional nature of the war, threatening to overwhelm Ukraine's air defense through sheer volume and transform the daily reality for soldiers and civilians into a constant battle against a relentless swarm from the sky. The announcement was a clear message to Washington, Berlin, and Paris. While the West prepares for war, Russia is already waging it on an industrial scale it believes its adversaries cannot match. The Russian industry ministers, flanked by military officials, detailed the achievement with pride, framing it as a victory over Western economic warfare. He explained that a nationwide effort involving the conversion of civilian manufacturing plants and the construction of new dedicated facilities had allowed Russia to achieve this massive scale-up. The production mix reportedly includes a vast numbers of low-cost FPV drones, suicide drones for frontline tactical use, upgraded Orlan-type reconnaissance drones for artillery spotting, and a significant daily output of the domestically produced Buran-2, the Russian versions of the Iranian-designed Shahed-136 long-range attack drone. The West thought they could cripple our industry with sanctions. The ministers declared they were wrong. They have only made us stronger and more self-reliant. Every drone that flies over Ukraine is a testament to the failure of their policies and the strength of the Russian people. This development presents a nightmarish strategic dilemma for Ukraine and its Western partner. Military analysts immediately point out the devastating economic asymmetry of this new reality. Ukraine relies on sophisticated and expensive Western air defense system, with individual interceptor missiles costing hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. Russia's strategy appears designed to exhaust this finite and costly supply by forcing it to engage with waves of drones that can cost as little as a few $1,000s each. A Ukrainian Air Force spokesman acknowledged the grave threats, stating, "No air defense system in the world can sustainably counter such a volume of targets. This is not a battle of technology anymore. It is a battle of mass. We need a new kind of support, and we need it now." The news landed in Washington as the final provocation in a day full of them. For an administration already incensed by Moscow's action, the drone announcement was seen as Russia's ultimate tangible rejection of every Western warning. Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth was reportedly in an urgent session with military planners tasked by a furious President Trump to formulate an immediate and effective counter-strategy. The focus shifted instantly to sourcing and fast-tracking massive quantities of cheaper, gun-based air defense system and advanced electronic warfare equipment capable of jamming drone signals on a mass scale. With the last diplomatic channel frozen and Russia now openly boasting of its capacity to sustain a high-intensity conflict indefinitely, the Trump administration was left facing its starkest choice yet. Moscow had not just escalated, it had revealed its long-term strategy for winning the war, to grind Ukraine down under a sky black with 1,000 new drones every single day. The West's next move would determine if that strategy would succeed. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel. And so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to So Kane Rich, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, you're first ones on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now. And we will continue to build this show for you. That, I swear, thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.